there are different considerations to take into account if you're going to sell your business and you're owned by a corporation, a family, or an entrepreneur founder. And I would say the most significant differences actually relate to emotion and the amount of and types of emotions that get into the deal, depending upon which of those animals you are. And I've worked with sellers in each of those categories, but maybe more importantly, in advising buyers, we've had to assess the emotional state of the seller in a number of cases in mapping out our own strategy for getting the transaction completed. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, for a corporation, very, very rarely is there a lot of emotion involved in the business decision to sell a unit or division or subsidiary. Something else has been at play to make the decision to do so. And there tends to be a lot more just corporate and business approach to the deal. But for a family-owned business, where it's been in the family for multiple generations, the decision to sell is sometimes viewed as a decision to turn your back on the family or the family history. And so there can be a lot of emotion bound up in that. And very typically, you'll have some family members with one point of view and others with another. And so it brings a lot of complexity into just the psychological, underpinnings of the transaction itself. And it can show up in a lot of different ways. For an entrepreneur founder, it's not all that dissimilar from a family-owned business. Most entrepreneurs view their business as their baby and something that they really, care very passionately about. But you don't have that multiple generation, sort of overlay. It's a different type of separation challenge. How will you separate your own personal identity from the identity of the business that you created? That tends to seep into the thinking and the negotiating and the like. So I see different emotional levels. And frankly, those also tend to shift during the course of the transaction, and we see more emotion show up as we get closer and closer to closing. People realize it's actually going to happen. And I think one of the jobs of a M&A practitioner is to try and help manage those emotions as best they can to keep the transaction on track. The other areas of difference in each of those areas, there's a need to focus on the tax planning and the consequences of the transaction, and to try and be as efficient as you can. But the types of tax planning that we're typically thinking about are slightly different. In that, for a corporate seller, it's their corporate tax bottom line that they're trying to manage. But for a family-owned business or an entrepreneur founder, it tends to be long-term intergenerational wealth planning and a desire to minimize the effect of estate taxes down the road in connection with the deal. We also worry about the immediate tax consequences of the sale, but we're really focused on those longer-term issues. So there's slightly different conversations that we have depending upon the type of seller in that regard as well. And then the last area that I think comes up pretty regularly in these transactions that might be different is just the types of approvals that are needed to get the transaction done. In a corporate context, there may be a corporate board that has to approve the deal. There may be a management team that has to approve the deal, and you have to know what those approval processes are. In a family business, you probably need a vote of some portion of the family to approve doing the deal, and that can be complicated. And then, in a straight up entrepreneur founder situation, if the entrepreneur owns the whole company, there's no real process there. As long as they want to do the deal, they're going to do the deal. But even in those situations, often we'll find they've brought on other investors, and there is an approval process that we have to get through, including a board and a shareholder group that might have disparate interests.